Okay, so today we're going deep on something pretty interesting, I think.
I think so, yeah.
This idea of like how these big societal trends,
Yeah.
like the currents of how things change and how people behave.
Right.
Maybe we can tie that into something super modern, like, how we all use the internet and social media these days.
Yeah.
So to do that,
Brilliant.
we've got some cool stuff to look at.
Yeah.
We've got this book, Al-Mashariyat, by Ibrahim bin Omar al-Sakran,
Okay.
which is all about,
Ooh.
these currents, these happenings in society.
Right.
And then we're also going to be bringing in a bunch of research
Yeah.
on internet and social media addiction.
Okay.
Like, some of the really early ideas about internet addiction disorder.
Right.
And also more recent studies on how we use social media.
Yeah.
So for you, the learner,
Mhm.
you're probably swimming in information all the time.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Drowning in it, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe by looking at these two things together,
Yeah.
we can get some
Yeah.
new insights
Yeah.
that might help you,
For sure.
kind of cut through the noise
Yeah.
and figure out how to handle,
Yeah, how to use these tools in a healthy way.
all this information and
Yeah.
the pull of these digital platforms.
Right, without being, totally overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to start off,
Okay.
let's talk about this idea of al-Mashariyat,
Okay.
which al-Sakran uses to talk about these, like
Yeah.
the currents, the happenings, the trends.
Yeah, the movements in society.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he starts his book
Okay.
in a kind of interesting way.
Yeah.
He's like,
How so?
hold on, I'm not going to just jump right into the political stuff
Okay.
or the social stuff.
Right, right.
He wants to set the stage first.
Okay. And
Like,
then Yeah.
how should we even approach trying to understand these things?
Yeah. Right. He wants to lay the groundwork first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So why do you think he does that?
Well, I think what's really crucial for Al-Sakran
Okay.
is having the right, lens, the right perspective
Okay.
to view these currents through.
Okay.
He talks about these two ideas.
Okay.
The makod and the maho.
Okay.
So makod, if you think about it, the learner,
Okay.
what's the core message
Okay.
of a societal change?
Okay.
It's the underlying intention or goal.
Right, right.
Where is this headed?
Okay.
And then the mahur, that's what we see, right?
On the surface.
Exactly. It's the surface level stuff.
Okay.
So Al-Sakran is saying,
Yeah.
we need to get to that makad, not just react to whatever's happening on the surface.
Right. So
Yeah.
understand the deeper meaning.
Yeah, the deeper meaning, exactly.
Yeah. Not just what
Yeah.
it looks like.
The superficial stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to do that, he brings in this other idea
Okay.
of
Yeah.
ruling characteristics.
Right. Al-tamizat al-lakma
Yeah, yeah.
in Arabic.
So what are those?
These are the
Vectors.
key features
Okay.
that really define
Right,
a
yeah.
particular
Right.
societal current.
Okay.
The defining characteristics that
Right.
make it what it is.
All right, so that's
Yeah.
our starting point for figuring this stuff out.
Yeah, it's where we begin to understand the essence of these trends.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And he really stresses,
he does.
really looking closely.
Yeah, careful observation,
Yeah.
thinking deeply, really taking the time to analyze
Yeah.
instead of just
Yeah.
jumping to conclusions.
Right, or getting lost in...
Oh, getting bogged down in
Yeah.
every little detail.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's got this great analogy. It's
Oh,
like,
what's that?
you judge a tree by its main branches,
Oh,
not every tiny little twig,
right. You don't need to count every leaf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's about identifying
Yeah.
those dominant trends.
yeah, those
Yeah.
big,
Yeah.
overarching
Yeah.
things. And I think that's something that's really helpful for us today
I think so too, yeah.
because there's just so much information.
Oh, there's so much. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, so it's easy to get lost
Oh, it's
in the weeds.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
having this kind of
Yeah.
framework to kind of
To filter.
filter and focus.
Exactly.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that he points out
Okay.
that I thought was interesting. What's that?
He says that
Yeah.
people's interpretation,
Right.
their
Or even-
haradat
Yeah. Itihaga.
can vary
Right.
between different groups.
Yeah, different societies.
Different societies.
different times even.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
things
Right.
change.
Right. So it's not just about
Yeah.
who's right and who's wrong. It's not about
Yeah.
one right answer.
Yeah, it's more about
It's about different perspectives
Yeah.
and understanding that
yeah.
there can be multiple valid interpretations
Yeah, based on
based on different circumstances and
Yeah.
different cultural values.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's dynamic. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
static.
right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind.
I agree, especially today
Yeah.
when, everyone's got their own
Yeah.
bubble.
Yeah. Filter bubble
Yeah, exactly.
online.
And they're seeing things.
Yeah. They're seeing the world
Yeah.
through a very specific lens.
Yeah, so just remembering that, like,
Yeah.
there are other valid perspectives out there,
Yes.
I think is really
Important.
important. Now, here's where it starts to get
Okay.
really interesting, I
Yeah.
think, in terms of the connection to, like,
Yeah.
our digital lives.
Okay.
He talks about this amazing interconnectedness
Right.
events.
المتباعة المتفرجة.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
as soon as I read that,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, the internet.
Of course.
Right. For you, the learner,
Yeah.
trying to stay informed
Yeah.
in today's world. It's just
Constant connection.
Like it-
Information overload.
and like this feeling that everything is
super connected.
connected,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a really
It's a powerful parallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because Al-Sakran is observing this in his own time.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is how much it's been amplified
exactly.
by the internet,
Yeah.
by social media, the scale,
Yeah.
the speed. Like, it's just
It's crazy.
unprecedented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he talks about this difference
Okay.
between the time of acquisition,
Right.
Knowledge.
I'll tell all.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the time of giving,
I'll tell.
yeah,
Yeah.
of knowledge.
Interesting.
And it's like
Yeah.
he's saying we need balance.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
He's saying don't
Yeah.
just be constantly taking in, but
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
you've got to take the time to process it, apply it,
Yeah.
internalize it,
Right, to like actually use it.
use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do something with it.
Exactly, not just hoard it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think
I think that's really important.
especially today,
Oh, especially today.
because
yeah.
we have access to so much.
Yeah, we're drowning in information.
It's just like
Fire hose.
constantly coming at us.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
how much are we actually
Right. How much are we
Yeah.
absorbing
Yeah.
and how much are we just
Yeah.
letting it wash over us?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this phrase
Okay.
that I thought was like really jumped out at me,
Okay.
the employment of tools and being captivated by them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Yeah.
this feels like
Yeah.
he's predicting.
It's almost prophetic, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Our relationship with technology today.
Absolutely.
He's saying like
Yeah.
our tools,
Yeah.
they can help us,
They can.
but they can also,
But they can also hold power over us,
maybe even captivate us.
captivate us,
Yeah.
control us even.
Yeah. And like that's
That's scary
kind of scary.
because it's like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
created these tools to
Yeah.
serve us.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what happens when they start to control us?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like who's in charge?
Right.
Yeah.
Like who's the master
Yeah.
and who's the servant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we move on
Okay.
from Al-Sakra,
Yeah.
there's a couple other things I want to touch on.
Yeah.
He talks about
Yeah.
the separation of politics and social order.
Right. Fal al-siyasa wa murtabat al-siyasa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a significant,
As a major.
major.
Majoriyat.
Najariya, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he kind of like doesn't want to focus on politics.
Right. He says he's not going to dive into that right away.
Yeah, not initially,
Yeah.
but he does note it.
Yeah. He flags it
As
as
an-
a
yeah.
significant shift.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting
It is interesting. Yeah.
because we're seeing,
We're seeing a lot of that.
a lot of
Yeah.
political division.
Polarization.
Yeah, polarization.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, maybe that's a whole other
That's a whole other
deep dive.
deep dive. Yeah.
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 And it's something to
Yeah.
to keep in mind.
Keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he moves into the first big section of his book.
Yeah.
It's called The Location of Majariya.
Right, Maki al-Mashara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
What are some of the key ideas?
okay, so he starts off with like an introduction,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Mood call.
Okay.
And he's basically,
Yeah.
stressing the importance of understanding these trends. Like,
Yeah.
this is important stuff, people. You
Yeah.
need to pay attention to
Yeah.
these shifts
Yeah.
that are happening.
And he talks a little bit about
Okay.
the linguistic roots.
Right. Abna Lisani,
Yeah.
like how language shapes our understanding of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
How we even talk about them
Yeah.
influences how we think about them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
one of the really key points
Okay.
is
Yeah.
his discussion of the soundness of Majariat,
Right, almajariyat.
Yeah.
So this is interesting.
So when he says soundness.
When he says soundness, he's basically saying
Yeah.
just because something is happening
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean it's beneficial.
Right.
So it's not like an automatic endorsement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just because it's a trend.
Yeah, just because it's
Yeah.
a current doesn't mean it's a good current.
Yeah, exactly. And he gives an example of like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
some people might say like piety
Okay.
is about
Yeah.
abandoning worldly life.
Yeah, like renouncing the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
it really?
He questions that.
a sound understanding.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
a truly sound
Yeah.
interpretation
Yeah.
of this trend?
Yeah.
Or is
Yeah.
it a misinterpretation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like he's really
He's encouraging us to think critically
Yeah.
about these currents that we're seeing.
Yeah, and not just accept them.
Yeah, don't just
Yeah.
blindly follow the trend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like think about it.
Think for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he brings up this idea
Okay.
of intellectual energy.
All right. Al-dinya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like,
Which is,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, the idea that like
yeah.
our mental effort
Yeah.
should be focused
Yeah.
and directed
Yeah, effectively.
effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
That-
that's so relevant.
especially today
Yeah.
when we're just bombarded.
Yeah, with
Distractions,
information,
it's-
notifications.
It's like
yeah.
our attention is pulled
Yeah.
in a million directions.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we maintain
Right. How do we
this-
keep our focus in
Yeah.
this environment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this actually connects to his
Yeah.
mention of
Uh-huh.
people of perfection.
Right. Al-Kamala.
Yeah. And he's referencing some earlier thinkers
Okay.
who talked about the importance of like a
Yeah.
focused heart
Okay.
and the dangers.
Yeah. Of
Okay. Yeah.
excessive distractions.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
this is not a new problem.
Right? It's just,
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just the scale is different. The
Yeah.
intensity is different. The
Yeah.
tools are different.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that fundamental challenge
Yeah.
of maintaining focus
Yeah.
in a world full of distractions
Yeah.
is timeless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to
Yeah.
like distractions of Majariat.
Right. By God Majoriat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like,
Which is basically like,
yeah.
you know, how these currents can pull us away
Yeah.
from what's important.
From what really matters,
Yeah.
from our goals,
Yeah.
from our values.
Yeah. And again, I think the connection
to our digital lives
to our digital lives
is so strong.
is so strong.
Because these digital platforms,
yeah.
they are
Yeah.
masters of distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he lays out the need for what he calls foundations of Majariat.
Right. Tala Majariat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like,
So he's saying
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
solid principles.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before.
Yeah.
With the Makurid and the Mojir.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need a framework.
For understanding these shifts.
Yeah, to like make sense of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally he introduces this idea of like the structural framework of Majariat.
Right. Al-Mashariat al-Shabakaya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's saying,
He's saying these trends
yeah,
are interconnected. They form networks.
Yeah.
They're not just isolated things happening.
yeah, they influence each
They
other.
influence each other. They're
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah.
They're interwoven.
Yeah. And I think that's really important.
It is,
Yeah.
because it helps us to see the
Yeah.
bigger picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
also Korea gives us,
Gives us a lot to think about.
this framework for understanding
Yeah.
these currents.
These currents, these
Yeah.
trends
Yeah.
that are shaping society.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now let's shift
Yeah.
gears a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about
Right.
the
Yeah.
research on
Yeah.
internet and social media use.
Got
And
it.
specifically,
Yeah.
this concept of addiction.
Okay.
So this really started to gain traction
Right.
back in the mid-1990s.
Yeah, like the Wild West days
Yeah, the early days.
of the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With this idea of internet addiction disorder.
Right. IAD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
what was the initial
So what were people thinking back then?
what was the thinking behind this?
Well, it was interesting.
Yeah.
People were starting to notice
Yeah.
that some people's behavior
Yeah.
online
Yeah.
seemed to mirror
Yeah.
patterns that they'd seen
Okay.
in other forms of addiction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the pioneers in this area
Okay.